Hi, Ted Morrissey here, making a video for my advanced creative writing class at Southern New Hampshire University. This week we're focusing on theme, and I mentioned in the written announcements that I'm putting together here that for just about all the other modules and things that we do in this class, I'm completely on board. I think they're very interesting, engaging, and I think they definitely are helping us along the way to becoming better writers and hopefully therefore more successful writers and that kind of thing. But I'm not completely on board with the discussion of theme. And that's because I'm a little uncomfortable. Well, actually, I'm a lot uncomfortable with the idea of us deliberately and consciously putting theme into our stories, poems, plays, creative nonfiction, and so forth. They're going to have themes, they're going to have meaning, but it's not the writer's job to incorporate theme as one would incorporate conflict, resolution, character details, setting details, and so forth. Theme and meaning, they're gonna evolve naturally from the story. I think that if we try to make our story or our play or our poem or whatever it might be say something definitive and articulate a specific sort of life lesson or worldview, that it really is going to be flat and not particularly interesting. Now, having said that, I will acknowledge that there definitely are works of literature where the authors definitely seem to have a theme that they were trying to communicate to their audience, and they managed to do so successfully and still create, very meaningful, worthwhile, entertaining, thought-provoking thought-provoking literature. Examples I think of like George Orwell, 1984, and Animal Farm. Clearly, Orwell was thinking about totalitarian societies in 1984 and the impact of propaganda on, on cultures and all those kinds of things. And then in Animal Farm, he definitely was modeling that on the Russian Revolution and the aftermath of it and that kind of thing. So he definitely had a theme or various themes that he was developing in those books. We think about Ray Bradbury in Fahrenheit 451, which has a very definite idea about book banning and why you shouldn't ban books, and that kind of thing. We think about the Dune series, the Dune science fiction theories, which is now, I think, is a Prime. I can't remember what streaming service is doing Dune now, but it has an environmental message that comes through pretty clearly, and so on. So it can happen. It can happen where an author has a particular message that they're trying to communicate to their reader or their viewer, whatever it might be. But generally speaking, I think that's a bad approach. I think that trying too hard to have your work say something is problematic. And I was going to pull here from this book, John Gardner, The Art of Fiction, Notes on Craft for Young Writers. This has been around for a long time. Gosh, I think it was probably published in the 80s originally, maybe. 1983. Yeah. So, it's been around for a long time, but it's an interesting discussion, and it approaches writing fiction particularly. But he also talks about stage management and screenwriting, that kind of thing, but mainly fiction writing, stories, novels, and so on. But he offers some practical advice, but it's largely theoretical, sort of philosophical about different aspects of writing and so on. But I would encourage you to get a hold of a copy and take a look at it if you're, especially again, if you're a fiction writer. But one of the things that Gardner talks about, I just want to read a little bit from it, and this is from the section titled "Interest and Truth." At some point, the writer stops planning and starts writing, Gardner says, fleshing out the skeleton that is his plan. Here, too, he is partly in control and partly controlled by the fictional process. Again and again, in the process of writing, he will find himself forced to new discoveries. right? And of course, it's sexist, right? We're talking about using he and him. Nowadays, we would be more, egalitarian than that. But Gardner's point, I think, is valid. From my experience, as someone who's been writing my whole darned life, is that the process is very organic. And yes, you can. And we've kind of talked about this earlier in the session about planning versus not planning, and you could have certainly thoughts, ideas going into the writing of the narrative, and they might be more formal in terms of outlining, etc. They might be less formal. You might be, jumping off from sort of a writing exercise or a writing prompt or whatever it might be. But in any event, you've got some thoughts that you're kind of having before you actually try to start creating scenes and developing characters. But at some point, you got to get in there and start doing it. And if you're doing it right, if you're doing it as well as it can be done, I think the process itself is going to start to take over, and you're going to figure out things about your characters, about what they're doing and why they're doing it that you had no pre-thought about until you began developing those characters and putting them in particular situations, and then those things kind of developed on their own. And theme emerges organically from all that, right? I think if you have a particular lesson that you want your reader to learn, first of all, you're writing a parable or a fable, not really a story or a novel or a screenplay, certainly not a poem or a creative nonfiction piece, right? But if you have a theme or a lesson that you want your reader to take away from the reading experience, you're really locking yourself into a very specific kind of a story, kind of a plot, limiting really, I think, the way that your characters will evolve, and therefore that's why the writing will tend to come out very kind of shallow and very simplistic and sort of two-dimensional, all of those kinds of things. Whereas if you are open to all the possibilities that your work may be about, then and you let the work kind of evolve naturally. You're trying to tell an engaging story with believable characters and a believable plot line, and hopefully you're using language in an interesting kind of artful way. And that's enough. I think that's plenty to think about as a writer. Trying to insert deliberately some sort of specific message into the text is problematic, right? I think it's gonna hold you back. So, like I said, I generally agree with pretty much everything that we've been studying this session, but the talk of theme, I think, is a little bit difficult, and sort of distracting or whatever, right? So I'm going to stop there, and I don't want to make this video too long, but those are my thoughts on why theme is the job of the reader or the viewer of the film. It is not the job of the writer. Write a good story, write a compelling story, write it well. It'll have meaning, it'll have themes naturally and organically, but it's up to the reader to sort all that out on their own.